Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. In this episode, we go into the minds of the gang stalkers. A lot of things I see online pretty much tells what the person or the target individual is going through, and if it's a delusion or if it's real. And those are good information in how to deal with gang stalking in general. But I figured, why not go into the minds of the people who do the gang stalking? What drives them? What kind of idiosyncrasies do they have, and why would they go about doing this thing to something or to someone who is innocent? So sit back, relax, take notes, and please comment if you have any suggestions for future podcasts. Thanks.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to really get into complex topics, pull them apart, and find those surprising truths. Today we're tackling something you hear a lot about, gang stalking. It gets sensationalized, and it's almost always looked at from the victim side. But for this deep dive, we're doing something different. We're flipping the lens completely. We're stepping into the shadows, really, to explore the minds of the people who do this, the perpetrators. It's often overlooked, but it's crucial. Our mission here isn't about saying whether the targeting experience is real or not. That's a whole other conversation. We want to understand the perpetrator, what's going on inside their heads, what psychological landscape, what kind of thinking leads to this coordinated, relentless harassment. Even if you're familiar with the term, this deep dive should offer a really fresh look. We're aiming to pull back the curtain on the psychology driving it.
Exactly. And we're grounding this in solid sources. We're talking forensic psychiatry studies. People like Sheridan and James have done key work here, plus medical journals, court records, cyber research too. Our goal is to pull out the core mental health traits, the motivations, the cognitive distortions, basically why this happens. And it reveals a surprising, often really self-destructive path for the perpetrators themselves.
Okay, so settle in. You're about to get a much deeper, more nuanced view on a really tough topic. We're going past the headlines here. Right, let's start unpacking the inner world then, the research. What does it actually tell us about the psychological profiles of these individuals?
Well, what's interesting is it's not just one single profile. It's more like a convergence of specific traits. A really significant portion, maybe 60 to 70%, show clear antisocial and narcissistic personality features.
Okay, so what does that actually look like in behavior?
It means things like very low empathy, a strong sense of entitlement, exploiting others. For these individuals, the motivation often seems rooted in a desire for control, for dominance over their victims. It's almost like seeing people as objects to manipulate.
Right, so a big part is about power and control. But that's not everyone involved, is it? The sources mention other things, like paranoia.
Absolutely. That's another key segment. Maybe around 30–40% display what we call paranoid or schizotypal features. These are people who have these irrational suspicions. They're hypervigilant. They tend to interpret, completely mundane things as part of some big coordinated plot against them or others.
And schizotypal. That's a bit different from just paranoia.
Yeah, it involves discomfort with social interaction, but also distorted thinking, sort of like living with this constant low hum of suspicion and maybe some unusual eccentric beliefs. It can be a real break from how most people perceive reality.
Okay, so you have the control types, and then the suspicious, hypervigilant types. And then there's something even more intense, mentioned delusional disorder.
Exactly. A number of perpetrators seem to have what's called delusional disorder, persecutory type. This isn't just, a vague suspicion. It's a fixed, unshakable belief that their victim somehow deserves the harassment.
Deserves it. Based on what?
It could stem from anything, really. A perceived slight. Maybe they think the victim was a whistleblower or some other deeply held, sometimes quite bizarre justification. And what's really insidious here is how these beliefs get reinforced. Online echo chambers are huge for this. The internet acts like a feedback loop, cementing these distorted views.
Making them almost impossible to challenge from the outside.
Pretty much. They become very resistant.
It's a chilling mix, isn't it? The control seeker, the hyper-suspicious,
Yeah.
and then those completely convinced their victim deserves it. When you think about how these patterns could potentially feed off each other, what really strikes you about that?
Well, it highlights how someone with these, let's say, vulnerabilities could be drawn into this, or even initiate it, feeling totally righteous about it. It's not just one thing. It's the merits of personality, distorted thinking, and maybe finding a group that validates it all.
That gives us a clearer picture of the inner landscape. Okay, so now, let's talk about action. We know about the traits, but what actually drives them? What pushes them from these internal states to actually doing things?
Yeah, the motivations are complex, but again, patterns emerge, especially when you look at court records and case studies. A big driver, maybe for about 65%, seems to be grudge or revenge. Simple as that sometimes.
So like a personal vendetta.
Exactly, often stemming from real or maybe imagined conflicts, a bad workplace situation, a relationship that went sour, just feeling deeply wronged. They're seeking payback, and they can be incredibly focused on it.
Okay, so it often starts very personal.
Oh.
But the term is gang stalking. How does it become a group thing?
Well, that leads straight into the next driver. This really powerful need for belonging and validation. Sources suggest around 70% of perpetrators join groups online, or maybe even offline often, to deal with their own feelings of inadequacy. They get this kind of twisted status, a sense of purpose, by being part of this us versus them dynamic. It's about finding acceptance, even if the group's purpose is harmful.
That makes a disturbing kind of sense. Feeling important by being part of something, even something destructive. And then how do they square that with themselves? How do they justify it?
That's where moral disengagement comes in. It's a key psychological trick, really. Perpetrators convince themselves their actions are justified. They might frame it as, social justice or we're exposing corruption. They genuinely believe they're the good guys.
Like heroes on a mission?
Something like that.
Yeah.
And it allows them to completely disconnect from the actual harm they're causing. It's like thinking, well, I'm fighting evil, so the ends justify the means, even if the means are awful.
Wow. The mental gymnastics involved. So how does this translate into their day-to-day thinking? How do they keep these campaigns going?
Right. This is where the cognitive distortions are working overtime. First, you often see grandiose delusions. They genuinely believe they have some special insight, like they've uncovered a truth no one else sees, or they're on a mission. This makes them pretty much immune to reason or evidence that contradicts them.
They know best, basically.
In their minds, yes. And that links to the next one, projection.
Projection. How does that work here?
They take their own negative feelings, maybe shame, anger, inadequacy, and they project them onto the victim. They'll tell themselves, oh, they're the real criminals, or they brought this on themselves. It deflects any need for self-reflection and keeps their own self-image intact.
Avoids facing their own issues by blaming the target.
Precisely. And then the group element, the gang part, brings in something else. Shared psychosis.
Shared psychosis, like a delusion spreading.
Essentially, yes. Think folie à deux, but potentially involving more people, especially online. These communities amplify individual delusions. Everyone's reinforcing each other's distorted beliefs. It creates this shared, warped reality that becomes incredibly strong, very resistant to any outside perspective. It's an echo chamber on steroids.
Okay, so we have the internal traits, the motivations,
Yeah.
grudge, belonging, justification, and these cognitive distortions that keep it all spinning. But how does this all come together to create that sustained, relentless harassment? What keeps it going?
There are some powerful psychological mechanisms reinforcing it. One is basically a dopamine feedback loop.
Dopamine, like a reward system.
Exactly. For some of these individuals, each act of harassment, each perceived win or successful bit of manipulation, it actually triggers reward pathways in the brain. It gives this physiological hit that reinforces the behavior. It can become almost addictive in nature.
That's a truly chilling thought, that the act itself becomes rewarding. How does that make it so hard for them to stop or even see the harm?
Well, it creates this powerful internal drive that can override logic or empathy. And layered on top of that, you often have moral licensing.
Moral licensing.
It's the belief that because their cause is righteous, correcting some perceived wrong, they have a sort of psychological license to behave badly. They feel justified, like the normal rules don't apply to them because their mission is so important in their eyes. It's a dangerous kind of self-permission slip.
And the group dynamic just fuels all of this,
Yeah.
right? Making it seem normal within that context.
Absolutely. That's social contagion. Online communities especially can normalize hostility. Research shows how targets often get dehumanized, maybe called perps or other derogatory terms. When the target isn't seen as fully human and everyone around you is doing it, those psychological barriers against causing harm just crumble.
Right. Let's make this more concrete. The sources mention some real-world cases that illustrate these dynamics pretty vividly. The eBay cyberstalking case from 2020 seems like a prime example.
It really does. You had former executives there clearly showing those narcissistic traits we talked about, and they had serious vendettas against journalists. They orchestrated this campaign. Threats, surveillance, even sending disturbing things in the mail. It wasn't just online stuff, it escalated, leading to felony charges, prison time. It shows what happens when those traits mix with a grudge and power.
And then there's the Ohio shooter case from 2022, which represents the really tragic, extreme end of things.
Tragically, yes. This individual killed 4 people and explicitly cited gang-stalking delusions in a manifesto. It's a horrifying example that underscores the potential connection to severe, untreated mental health issues like paranoid schizophrenia or psychosis. It shows how dangerous these delusional frameworks can become when they completely take over.
And then there's something maybe less extreme but still very destructive. Workplace mobbing.
Yes, these are cases where groups systematically harass a colleague, often trying to force them out. The traits you often see in the perpetrators there include high neuroticism, jealousy, maybe a ruthless desire to get ahead professionally. It's that control and dominance motivation again, often mixed with antisocial behavior, calculated, damaging campaigns.
Okay, so listening to all this, the narcissism, the paranoia, the delusions, the revenge, the need to belong, it raises a huge question. What actually happens to the perpetrators in the long run? Does this quest for control, this self-justification, does it actually work out for them? Or is it, well, self-destructive?
Oh, it is unequivocally self-destructive, profoundly so. The consequences are often severe. Sources suggest something like 75%, three-quarters, end up losing their real-world relationships because they become so obsessed with the harassment. Their focus just narrows, becomes toxic, and pushes people away.
So they might join a group seeking belonging, but they end up more isolated than ever from genuine connections.
Exactly. The irony is deep. And then there's the legal and financial fallout. We see figures like 65% facing prosecution. That can mean felony convictions. And around 30% experience serious financial collapse, legal fees, job loss, reputation ruined. It shatters their lives tangibly.
And mentally, what's the toll on their own minds?
This is possibly the most disturbing outcome. A really striking number, around 40%, actually end up developing mirror image persecutory delusions themselves.
Wait, they start believing they're being persecuted?
Yes. They essentially become their own victims, psychologically speaking. Their constant focus on enemies, the hypervigilance, it seems to warp their own perception of reality. There's a quote from Dr. Sarah Martinez, a cyberpsychology researcher, that captures it perfectly. She said, "Gang stalkers' psyches become halls of mirrors. Their attempts to shatter others' sanity often fracture their own."
Wow, halls of mirrors. That really paints a picture of the internal chaos. It makes you think about the clinical side, the legal side. I mean, how do you even help someone that entrenched?
That's the massive challenge. Perpetrators almost never seek help voluntarily. They often see therapy or any intervention as part of the conspiracy against them.
So treatment is incredibly difficult.
Extremely. They usually lack insight. So from a prevention angle, the focus really has to be on early intervention for those underlying traits, antisocial tendencies, paranoid thinking, ideally much earlier in life, before these patterns solidify.
And for the legal system, prosecuting this must be tough, given how covert it can be.
It is tough. Accountability really hinges on robust digital evidence. You need coordinated messages, server logs, digital footprints. Piecing together that coordinated effort from often scattered online activity is crucial, but challenging.
So today, we've really journeyed into the minds of gang stalkers. We looked at those core traits: narcissism, paranoia, delusion. We unpacked the motivations: revenge, belonging, twisted justice. We saw the cognitive distortions, the mental gymnastics, and the mechanisms like dopamine hits and moral licensing that keep it going. And ultimately, we saw the deeply self-destructive path many of these individuals end up on: isolation, ruin, and even mirroring the very persecution they inflict. Understanding the why, even when the actions are so harmful, gives us, I think, really crucial insights.
Absolutely. And while their actions cause immense harm, understanding the psychology behind it isn't about excusing it, but it can help inform how we think about prevention, about intervention, even if those paths are incredibly difficult. It helps us see the whole picture.
Definitely. And maybe this leaves you thinking, considering these deep psychological fractures, this self-destruction, what does it really tell you about the true cost of seeking control or validation by harming others? And how might knowing this shape how we approach these complex issues, maybe with more focus on the underlying mental health factors much earlier on? Something to mull over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive today.